And today, we're going to go over a pretty comprehensive introduction to the tool called Model Compare within our BIM project suite. Now, as always, we like to keep our eyes on the questions window, and so if you have questions about today's topic, we encourage you to throw them over there in the GoToWebinar questions window. If you're watching this as a recording in the future, you can, of course, throw questions into the YouTube site. We also do record these, obviously, as I just mentioned, our YouTube channel. So this will be recorded and put to our YouTube channel here within about 24 hours of the presentation of this. So with that, let's jump in and talk about the actual content that we're going to cover today and why we think this is kind of meaningful. Truth is, when we're exchanging models back and forth between architects and engineers, ourselves and our other team partners on projects, there can be a lot of issues with that whole exchange process. Who changed something? When did they do that? What actually got changed? I can't necessarily always see something in a plan view, so did it actually change? And our time spent reviewing some of these models, trying to investigate what those changes are and how it's going to impact us, that can take a lot of time. It can take some time, and often we can miss some things, and that can be a big problem. So the goal here with the Model Compare tool is to effectively and quickly identify where things have changed in the models, know exactly what those changes were, and really reduce those interruptions to our design processes or engineering processes. So we're going to kind of cover that live today. We're going to go over a few very specific things. I'm going to show you where the Model Compare tool exists, since that's the tool we're talking about here. We're going to take a look at the UI of this tool. We're going to try and configure some actual settings and take a look at what taking a snapshot is, what that process is, and what it means. Then we're going to take a look at executing a comparison, actually running a comparison between two different versions of a model when we've taken some snapshots. And we'll take a look at the results of those comparisons as well. And then finally, in case you don't actually have it already, we're going to take a look at how you can get your hands on the Model Compare tool itself. We feel it's a pretty powerful tool, and we want you to know where you can get it. So with that, I'm going to be jumping in live and talking about all of this live within the Revit interface, since I'm not big on death by PowerPoint. First things first, where do we find the Model Compare tool itself? So I'm going to jump over to Revit here. And normally we're up here, wrong button. We're over here on the architecture tab or the structural steel tab, whatever. We're in all these different areas over here, systems tabs, you name it. I happen to be in Revit 2020 at the moment, but this same exact process works in 21, 22, 23, 24. One installation of our tools automatically applies to all of them. I'm going to go here to the tab called CTC Productivity. That's the tab where this is going to be on in the modern install, the 24.2 version of these tools. And looking at this here, I'm going to be working with the CTC BIM project suite. Now I have mine configured to show me all of the free tools and all of the licensed tools at the same time. But regardless, this tool, Model Compare, is actually a licensed tool, so it will be on your ribbon pretty much no matter what. This tool here is one of the dark green colored icons, which means it does require a license to run. And if you don't happen to own the suites, I will show you later how you can get your hands on it anyway and try it out for yourself. I'm going to put this back up on the ribbon up here, put it back in the correct order, and I'm going to open up the Model Compare tool itself. And while that's opening up, we're going to take a look here at the Model Compare user interface. That's the whole goal here, is to figure out how this tool functions and what it's going to do for you as a part of this introduction. So in this Model Compare tool here, I'm just going to move it down to the bottom so that the splash page from one of our other tools isn't a distraction. There's a few important buttons up here. You can take a snapshot. This lets you capture data that exists currently within a model. You can run comparisons. This lets you take two versions of a snapshot and compare them together. After you've run a comparison, you can save that report out. So that's an option that we have here once a comparison exists in the interface, and we can then share that with other team members, perhaps via Microsoft Excel or some other methodology where we can use that report to help other team members without using the Model Compare tool. We can help them understand what some of the differences are. We have some features inside of here where we can automatically zoom, automatically select, or copy some information about something that's in our comparison report here or live within the model in the background. This is designed, by the way, to be run while you have a model open on which those snapshots were run. So you can actually potentially zoom around and select elements that maybe have changed. There's also some options here to work with your filters. We'll see those over here in the Take Snapshot, and we use these filters and configuration files to actually potentially run this model compare tool on some kind of a schedule. So maybe you get updated models on a regular interval, and you want to make sure that you're capturing those updates every single time they come in. And so maybe once a week you tell it to run on a certain collection of models. This scheduler here can be told to run so you're not manually interacting with the Take Snapshot portion after you've first configured it. You can simply modify the scheduler and add a few more models to it, depending on how your settings are configured. There's also a few options here, and then of course our typical obligatory help, videos, support, and about tools here. And by the way, if you've installed this tool and you want to watch this introduction in the future, and that's true also of all of our other tools, you can click the videos button. That will take you to the playlist dedicated to this tool here, or whichever tool you happen to be in. All right, so with that, let's actually go through the exercise of taking a snapshot, or at least going through the motions of taking a snapshot. I'm not going to actively take it today because it takes a little bit too long for a webinar-style presentation to actually take the full snapshot. On this particular model, we'd be sitting here looking at a screen that just has a progress bar for about 3.5 to 5 minutes, depending on how fast my computer decides it wants to function today. So we're going to take a look at the process of taking a snapshot and what that looks like. When I click the Take Snapshot button, it's going to first scan my background model. And now in this case, it's letting me know that I haven't saved my changes yet. And I could technically take a snapshot without doing any saving if I really wanted to, though I think that's typically ill-advised. It's usually better to save. Instead of you watching me save, though, I'm going to tell it just to go ahead because the change that I made was I panned a view and I went to a floor plan. And so the active view is a little different. It's actually not that important for me today. So I'm going to tell it to yes, go ahead and take a snapshot anyway. In here with your snapshot settings, you're going to tell this where to save your snapshot. This is a captured collection of the information stored within the model, stored in an external file format. So I'm going to browse someplace on my system, and I've actually got a folder here that I like to use. I'm going to be throwing this into my C demo folder in my settings model compare directory so I can keep this snapshot for the future. Also, I can tell this exactly what it is I want to include, and depending on what you're going after, you can make your snapshots take less time by changing how much information you're going after. So you can configure some specific settings here, and you can load those up so that you can use those repeatedly. You can also take those settings and save them as your defaults. Or if you've made modifications, you could load your defaults and not have to browse to a specific file type. So you could actually set all user computers up in the office, if you're an admin, to use the same default configuration so that by default, they're getting what you want them to get. Now, out of the box, on installation, the default is to get everything. It gets everything. Every single fast parameter, those that don't take very long to get. Every single slow parameter, those that the Revit API is kind of a pill about, and it takes quite a bit longer to get it. It makes your snapshots take a lot longer. So you can choose to include everything. You can choose to include all of the data from every single category. But now if I'm working on a specific kind of project and I know that the model that I'm receiving is only expected to have certain categories of objects, I can tell it not to include all Revit categories, and I could go through this list and I could remove explicit items that I don't need to worry about. Maybe I'm working on an HVAC model that I've just received. I don't probably need to worry about walls and rooms, but I do probably care about spaces and space separations and air systems and items like that. So I could keep those in a system here in a collection of settings and save that. So the next time I get an HVAC model, I can restore those settings. I can load them up. Or maybe I'm working on an architectural background that I've just received as an engineer, and maybe I want to capture everything in case there's certain things that are expected to be in there. But probably the architecture model isn't going to have things like air systems. They're probably not going to have plumbing systems or electrical systems. So I probably don't need to worry about those because that's not really the responsibility of that party. So I can speed up my capture of data by not even including those categories of objects. It just makes the snapshot take less time. Now, similarly, over here, I could go through and tell it that I want to explicitly include lists of certain parameters. So I could edit this list here and tell it certain parameters that perhaps I care to go after. Maybe I want to know the XYZ positions, the lengths of objects, the heights of objects. This thing has already scanned my entire model, and it knows all of the parameters that could be here. So I could go in and actually leverage those built-in parameters. I can, if I want to, specifically show parameters that are, say, project parameters inside of here. Now, if I do this, it's going to take it a while to scan all the objects, so I'm not going to do this right now. But it's a one-time thing. I only have to do that once to include those parameters in this list and ultimately include them in what I'm capturing. Once again, if you're being a bit selective over here, you can speed up that capture time quite significantly. And that's true also of the what we call slow parameters, those that take a bit longer to get. Things like, I think the work set of an item is really slow in the database to get. So maybe you don't care about the work set that something is on. Maybe you do. Maybe you only care about the physical existence and position of items and their physical dimensions. Well, you can really speed up your snapshot if you are careful about that. Now, ultimately, what you would do is click the Take Snapshot button once you have your configuration all set and ready to go the way that you want. You take a snapshot and you let it cook for about 3 to 5 minutes, depending on your model size. Some models, if they're in the 1 gig range, they might take up to like 10 minutes to actually take a snapshot, which is why, once again, once you've saved your settings, you can leverage those settings over here with the scheduler, with a configuration, and know that it's capturing these models on a regular interval, and perhaps you set that up to capture after hours, so it's not taking up time throughout the day for you to manually capture. But of course, you can always capture on demand if need be. I'm not going to actually take a snapshot, like I said, because it's going to take just a little bit too long. The next major step inside of this workflow is to actually compare snapshots. This is where you take the data captured from one snapshot and you compare that to the data captured in another snapshot. And this is where the real power and user interface of this tool begins to kind of surface, because so far we've been looking at a fairly blank user interface and we went into one button to actually take a snapshot. Now we're going to build a new comparison and take a look at what this looks like. And then ultimately, after I've built up a new comparison and I show you the workflow, I'm going to open an already run comparison just to save a little bit of time in a presentation. So when you build up a new comparison, you browse for an older snapshot. Okay, I'm going to browse for one that I took earlier today, actually. And then I can browse for one that I took a little bit later after I had made some model changes very intentionally. About 20 minutes later, I made some changes to the model and took another snapshot, so I can open that up. Now, it doesn't immediately show me the differences because I need to tell it what of all of the elements, what of all of the available categories do I want to compare from one side to the other. And most of the time, we'll just select everything. Give me all of the things. Let everything compare. If it's in the model, let me compare it. You can also go to parameters over here, and you can be very specific about what parameters you're comparing. So this will tell me everything that exists within those files that it's captured, and I can choose to compare everything, or I can limit my comparison down to just a few things that I really care about. You can actually use that as a part of your comparison strategy, because you could take a snapshot of everything in the model, so you have all of the data, all of the potential data, understanding that it could potentially take a little bit longer to take that overall snapshot. But then when it comes time to actually run a comparison, maybe there are some specific parameters inside of here that you want to actually capture and want to actually compare versus other things. So you can choose to then be very explicit about that. And once again, with these element settings and the parameter settings, you can both save and reload these comparison settings in the future, so you don't have to keep reinventing your settings every single time you want to run some kind of a snapshot comparison. Also a little bit meaningful here is sometimes if somebody took a full snapshot of one model and a partial snapshot of another, it might be meaningful to actually compare the settings that were used for each of these snapshots, just in case there's fairly divergent snapshot values or settings. because the comparison that might come back might tell you that, well, this snapshot used to have this piece of data, but now it doesn't have that piece of data, and you might get false positives for changes. So I like to just know sometimes that there's a difference between the two, and it'll scan both the snapshots and let me know what the settings were. It just gives you a little Excel printout saying that they're the same or what the differences might have been. So I'm, again, in this case, going to keep all the settings set. I am not going to click OK because I do not want to wait for this comparison to fully run. This takes at least 5 minutes, if not 10 minutes, to actually run a comparison. It's one of those things that I'll usually start, grab a cup of coffee, come back, and it'll usually be on the screen and ready for me. So instead of us watching the progress bar of this thing comparing all of the differences between an entire model's flattened out bit of data and another version of that model's flattened out bit of data, what I'm going to do is open up a comparison that I've already pre-run in the past. And we're going to take a look at the results about what shows up inside of here and actually why this information might be interesting to you. So this is going to show you everything that you can possibly know about the model if you've captured it. It's going to tell you what the original file path was, where it was captured from, when it was last saved by somebody, what Revit version it was when the snapshot took place, when the data was extracted. Now, in this case, you'll see I haven't actually run and saved a comparison since 2015. It's been a little while, but these tools are incredibly stable. If you had a saved comparison back then and you want to run a new comparison now, you can absolutely do that because the data structures are consistent. You can know what the data values are in the project information, how many direct model objects, annotation objects, loaded families, and views exist in each version of the model, just as sort of a summary. How many schedules or legends existed before or now, how many materials exist or existed, what the phases were, and if they have changed, if the names have updated at all, how many levels there are, and if those values have changed at all. If there was any grid lines inside of here, if those numbers have changed. You can see just a quick general summary of what's going on in here. And just looking at this color legend down here, anything that's in green is exactly the same. Anything that's in yellow has some kind of a difference. So if it's green, I can pretty much ignore it. But if it's yellow, I can actually start to maybe pay attention to some of those numbers. We'll see this theme continuing as we look at the actual elements, parameters, values, and the rest of the report. So you can actually see, like in this case, there's a greater number over here in this model of actual modeled elements, but there are fewer definitions of annotation objects, showing that the old model had a greater number than the new one has. And then, switches again, there's more families loaded now than there was before. So simple graphics here in the middle of greater than, less than, to help you understand like where the changes are and where that might be. Now we're going to see something very similar to that when I get over here into the elements area. So these elements are broken down into sort of a couple of different ways. There's families, which are the family definitions. There's drawn model category objects. These are instances of objects. And then there's drawn annotation categories, or instances of annotations. And we can see that in all three of these areas, there are things that are different. There are some that are newer in my current version, some that are newer in the old version or whatever, or different in the old version. And so we can begin to expand these out and see explicitly which model categories were actually affected between these two. Now at this point, down here on the bottom left on this user interface, I have turned off, for the comparison type and the parameter values, I've turned off anything that was the same. If it's equal, I really don't care if it's the same, because there is mountains of data in these models. What I'm trying to do is highlight anything that's different, which is why it's in yellow, or non-existing in the old type or new type, where it's either new objects or deleted objects. And we'll see those added or removed objects in the newest model over here to the right, showing up as either blue or red. And then those are things that I can really start paying a bit of attention to, and well, the changes for that matter as well. So when I'm looking at this, I'm going to make this just a little bit bigger here. I don't think I can actually zoom in on this. I wish I could, but this doesn't have a zoom control on it. If I wanted to pay attention to something like doors, if I'm looking at this here, there are some new instances, added instances of this bifold style door panel, it looks like. It used to not be there, but now it's here. There's this bifold panel that now exists in the model. There's a bunch of other doors that have somehow been modified. And if I want to know how they've been modified, I can see things like their construction data didn't exist before, or maybe wasn't captured before, but now it has a value. And in fact, this was captured before, but we swapped the door out for a new instance of a door. So it actually changed from one variant to a new variant of that same door that now has a new parameter value, and the current like show 3D angle value is set to no. Now, this is one of those things that I probably don't care about the checkbox for show 3D angle, but I captured it in my snapshot. And when I did my comparison, I told it to compare it. So this is giving me some extra noise that maybe I didn't need. Lesson learned. In a future snapshot, perhaps I don't actually compare this value, or maybe I don't capture it in the first place when it's coming from the architecture model, because maybe I don't care. There are some other things in here that I do care about. If there's a change in the graphical angle, maybe I care. In this case, it's 45 degrees. That might mean this is representing an existing door. That's usually what I see in floor plans, is 45 degrees represents existing. There is X, Y, and Z bounding box values inside of here that have changed in some form. There's an area property of some parameter value that's changed to nothing, apparently. It's not populated. There's other values inside of here that probably didn't exist, again, because of the definition of the door itself. Maybe didn't have those parameters before, but now it does. So again, these are things that I probably really don't care about capturing. I just more care about, like, did the angle change, and does the boundary of the element change, meaning maybe it's physically moved, right? So those are things that maybe I care about. Materials and finishes, other properties inside of here. Again, there's a bunch of noise that's inside of here that I probably don't care about. So I probably shouldn't be capturing all of those elements. But this is interesting to be able to see that this particular door, someplace in my model, has changed in some form or fashion. Now, this doesn't tell me what level it is or was on, and that's because I'm not telling it to show me equal values. But I bet this is probably on level 1. I'm just guessing. So if I was to, let's actually open up the floor plan view level 1, and if I turn on the auto select option and I turn on the auto zoom option, when I pick this door or this other door over here, it should actually at least select it. There it is. It's actually over here in the floor plan. So I can actually see this door panel being highlighted and what it is now. Maybe I care. Maybe I don't. Oh, this is a bifold door. Of course, it's going to be at 45 degrees. That's silly of me. I wasn't actually paying attention to what it was I was working with there. So yeah, that's going to be a 45-degree graphic out there. So that's not really very meaningful as well. But I can pick on any other doors out here, and I guess I didn't turn on auto zoom, or maybe it's not activating for me. Oh yeah, it doesn't know what view that's in. So normally when I go ahead and select something, it will zoom to it and potentially open the floor plan for me so I can know exactly what this object is. So I find that to be really meaningful, giving me the ability to navigate around and see exactly the element in my active model that was changed and see what the current condition is, and maybe make an action plan around what that might mean. Now, it doesn't show me the old position or old kind of values of something, but at least it kind of gives me an idea what's going on. Now, another thing that I find very interesting here is when something used to exist but now no longer exists, right? So if I pick on just a random wall here, I can see like, hey, this wall has somehow changed. And I can again expand out the values and know that the area of the wall or the volume of the wall has changed. Maybe that's because the ceiling height moved and this wall was attached to the ceiling, and that's why this value changed. Good to know. Not super critical in this case. It wasn't a physical position in the floor plan, but maybe the height of the wall updated. In fact, it looks like maybe it got a little shorter because the volume decreased and the area decreased. So not by a lot, but it's good to know. But in this case, let's see if we can figure something out here about these walls right here, these ones that are in red. What does that mean again? Well, it means that they used to exist, but now they don't exist anymore. So the design team had deleted these walls in my latest snapshot. Now, again, I've got auto zoom and auto select on. Auto select isn't going to do anything now because these walls aren't here, but it will zoom to where they used to be. This is what I find interesting. I can zoom to where something was, and I can start to do some investigation here. In fact, let's pull this off to the side here. We'll just click through these 5 little areas. There actually is a cloud around this area, which is good to know. Somebody actually was documenting that there was a change. But zooming into the model, there used to be something sort of in this middle area here. And if I click the next wall that was in that list, it zooms in. And if I zoom back just a little bit, yeah, something used to be sort of in the middle of that area, right? Zooming in again, something used to be here. So if I'm looking at this and understanding this correctly, this area of my floor plan probably had a series of divided offices of sorts, and now it's more open floor plan. And so because of that, maybe I have some things to understand. Now, this is something I would probably pick up in a floor plan, maybe in a Bluebeam comparison, perhaps if that's what you're doing. But there's certain things that you just wouldn't pick up on. Maybe somebody changed a piece of text to say C mechanical, and you weren't paying attention super close to that one little thing. It's difficult to see text changes in some of those highlights. So this here could tell me about that. Maybe a ceiling height changed. Maybe something about the spec properties of an object changed, but it's not documented in the physical construction document set yet. Might be meaningful for me to know those things. So I like being able to leverage these and understand what's going on with these elements, and then also with the parameter values of discrete items inside of here. So this will go through the individual values of parameters right on down to the actual text that was at play in the model, and I can see what the old value was and what the new value is for everything that's changed, every parameter, every dimension, everything about the model. I can see all of those changes and where they were updated, whether they're new properties, old properties that got deleted, whatever, you name it, these properties are here for you to review. Now, you can also take this and you can save out this report. If I save this out to an Excel file, this information becomes available in Microsoft Excel, where you could run Power BI files against it. You could pass portions of this data off to your team members, and you can leverage this in other ways outside of just using the model compare tool if you want to. So you can begin to leverage other aspects in your workflow by using this particular tool. So how do you get your hands on this tool if you don't already have it installed? I want to show you where you can go to find this. So I'm going to go to the ctcsoftware.com website. I'm right up here on ctcsoftware.com if you want to go there. And if you go to the product drop-down, this is one of the tools in the BIM project suite. So the BIM project suite itself, you can try it for free for 14 days just using this little button right here. It'll let you register for a free trial. And it will give you access to the download for the latest version of the BIM project suite. Now, if you already own the BIM project suite, but you don't have it installed or you don't have the latest version of it, you can always go and sign in up here. And on your main account page, there is a downloads area inside of there. There's going to be a button that's going to show up right here. There it is, downloads. This will give you access to all of the downloads that you actively own for the BIM suites, the SIM suites, and the Hive products. The BIM project suite is one of the BIM suites tools, so you can download that and get that latest installer right through here. When you do go to the download, I want you to pay very close attention because there's two kinds of installers. There's a single user installer and there's a multi-user installer. Those of you who are sort of bigger companies with managed IT groups, you are almost certainly going to want the multi-user installer. If you work for yourself and you are a consultant working on your own projects, you can use either one. Either one will work. It depends on kind of how you want to function, but the bigger companies, you guys are probably going to want the multi-user installer as what you're going to want to download when you try this out. The two do not install side by side very friendly, so you will want to pick one and stick with that sort of pattern if you download this suite to test this out. Multi-user is recommended. Okay, with that, I'm going to be jumping into a QA session in case you have any major questions about this tool. Right now is a great time to queue those up. But for those of you who aren't going to hang out for the questions and answers session, I want to say thank you. We always appreciate when you show up live, when you have the opportunity to interact with us and have the opportunity to ask questions if it's meaningful for you. We feel that adds value for you. We hope you feel the same. But thank you for that, and we look forward to seeing you in future CTC webinars.